I've allowed for the live delay long enough. We'll welcome back. It's 2 p.m. We roll on with our Giving Tuesday special programming live from BTI. And we're making our way around the Institute, and we're very lucky to have a few minutes to spend with the president of BTI, David Stern. We are in his office right now, and I'm going to turn it over to David and Vanessa Greenlee for a little conversation about the Institute and the nature of science in general. So take it away.
Hi, everyone. My name is Vanessa Greenlee, and I'm on David's support team here at Boyce Thompson Institute. And I want to thank Keith, our lovely host, for doing these events today. This has been so much fun. I've been watching these at my desk all day. So we're introducing David Stern, the president of Boyce Thompson Institute. David has been at the Institute since 1989, I believe, president since 2004. And you run a laboratory here at BTI. He has a focus in the laboratory on, he may have to step in and say this better than myself, but chloroplast biology and the interaction between the nucleus and the cytoplasm. So what do those little green organelles do, and what are they really up to in there? You never know. I'll turn it over to you for a minute, David.
Well, thanks for having me on the show. It's very exciting to be on live TV for the first time in my life, as old as I am. So, yeah, I'm a grizzled veteran of BTI, here for an awfully long time, since 1989, because it's a great place and I've never had any reason to leave. So, yeah, let's talk.
Okay. Well, we're going to start off by delving into the history of Boyce Thompson Institute a bit. Many of our audience may know about BTI, but may not know the history of how it all began, how the Institute started. And I know you've given this spiel many times, so maybe you could tell everybody how BTI got its great start.
Well, when I became president of BTI, I had a lot of catching up to do, because when you come here as a scientist, all you dig into the science. If you look out in the laboratories, the postdocs, the students, the technicians, the faculty, they're digging into the science. So I read William Boyce Thompson's biography when I became president, and I read about the history of the Institute. There have been two sets of faculty that have documented the history of the Institute in some detail, from its founding in Yonkers, New York, back in the 1920s. And so Boyce Thompson, as we all know in this room, wasn't a scientist. He was a wealthy man who wanted to make a difference, and his issue was really food security. He had gone over on a Red Cross mission to Russia around the time of the revolution, and we kind of know this instinctively, but he saw viscerally that hungry people aren't happy people, and he wanted to make sure that never happened in America, probably around the world, and decided that the best way to ensure food security was by understanding more about plants and how they work. And so he got some good advice: establish a research organization to study plants, and you will impact the world in positive ways, including food security. So Boyce Thompson set up a research institute next to his house, had a golf course, lots of laboratories. It's a beautiful place, but eventually it outgrew its origins and moved up to Cornell, where it could be closer to other kinds of science, because science today is really a marriage of disciplines. It's not just plant science, it's plants and a lot of other disciplines working together, and this is a great environment to do it. So BTI made a wise decision in the 70s to relocate up to this campus where we are today.
I'm always intrigued to hear the complex facets of William Boyce Thompson's personality, that he was a mining magnate and yet had the wisdom or the foresight to listen to this advice and to make an investment in understanding why plants do all the things that they do. And I like thinking back about a curious mind such as his.
Well, we see this today even. There are a lot of very wealthy people. You think of the Facebook founders who want to make a huge difference through philanthropy in areas that they know very little about. So in a way, Boyce Thompson was prescient. He was doing this kind of thing before others. There were the Carnegies. There have been other wealthy families in American history that have made a huge difference in research and health and education. And it's a great thing, isn't it, that people who have the means have also the desire to make a difference in the lives of millions of people. So he was one of those.
Keith, you want to step in?
No, I will say, though, you mentioned the Facebook founders, and there's an interesting thing going on today. Today is Giving Tuesday, as we've mentioned, and a foundation that we're familiar with here at BTI is the Gates Foundation, and they are actually doing a match across all of Facebook. So every nonprofit that raises $1,000 through Facebook's giving platform, they'll match it today. So that's kind of another example of kind of this mesh of technology and philanthropy and research all kind of coming together, with the catalyst being Facebook, a software created that has 1.4 billion users, and now it's a way to connect everyone with these organizations, which is pretty incredible.
Well, at the time that Bill Gates stepped away from running Microsoft, he was known, he was synonymous with the PC. Back then, Apple computers were almost extinct. In fact, I had a lot of pressure at Boyce Thompson to get rid of my Macintosh, which I asked from the very beginning, and get a PC because they were taking over the world. And look how that's changed now with the everything world we're in.
Yeah.
But Bill Gates was only known really for computers. We didn't have other devices at that time really. And now he's become known as a philanthropist. And he made a decision to work in the human health area, especially in the developing world, but quickly discovered, like Boyce Thompson did, that you can't unlink food and health. And again, it's one of those things that's kind of instinctive. We all think about eating well or eating enough, but how to act on that. So the connection between plants and human health is one that is also recognized by one of our foundations, local foundations, the Triad Foundation that funds us. And again, curing a disease isn't necessary if one doesn't get sick. And eating well is a great way to not get sick, whether it's growing plants well so that the environment is protected, or whether it's the quality of the food itself. And of course, our food choices make a difference as well.
Well, guys, this is a great segue, actually, talk about prescience to our next discussion topic, which is, so we've been talking about the connection between philanthropists and foresight and wisdom, and thinking about ways to make an impact in our world. And we're gonna gear the conversation now a bit more more targeted way toward agriculture and investments in agriculture. And we're going to explore with you a little bit, David, any kind of connections that there might be between advances in agriculture and political or social instability. So that seems to be, you talked about William Boyce Thompson and his Red Cross mission to Russia, certainly a predominant theme there. But what about those connections that we're still seeing today?
Yeah, back in the day that Boyce Thompson was founding this organization, we didn't have the issues with climate and with overpopulation and with land use that we have today. Today we have desertification. We have a giant mess in the Mississippi Delta with sometimes the Great Lakes with algal blooms from fertilizer runoff. And we're producing food in amazing ways at a scale that would have been unimaginable in those days. But food is not produced equally around the world. There's a lot of food distribution problems, there's food shortage problems, there's food quality problems. The kind of eating starch isn't as good for you as eating protein, for example, or where are your vitamins going to come from? And what the Gates Foundation has recognized, among others, is that making countries food self-sufficient around the world is what matters. And how do we do that? It's not as simple as just saying, turn your country into the American Corn Belt, or just to ship the extra corn that we grow overseas. Countries that don't get their share of good food and good quality food have a lot of social problems. People who don't eat well don't learn well. The education level drops. Good jobs aren't out there to be had. So there's a lot of ricocheting problems of food insecurity. And where does Boyce Thompson Institute fit into all that? I mean, we are trying to be on the leading edge of finding new solutions, new ways for food sufficiency to take place. We have to give countries the tools in their seeds and what goes around those seeds. Let's say special fungi like the Maria Harrison Lab studies that give phosphate to plants. So how do we provide farmers with the tools to become food self-sufficient? It's not enough by itself. It requires a set of social commitments, a set of government commitments, a set of land use commitments. It requires water.
Breeding toolkits.
Yeah. So we want to be part of that toolkit, if you like. It's a great name of solutions that help everybody in the world become food self-sufficient. That's what everybody wants. Nobody wants to be dependent on others for their well-being.
So David, I've heard you say many times, maybe folks that be watching would be interested to hear about what makes it exciting for you to come to BTI every day and do the work that you do and talk to your peers, talk to your colleagues about BTI science and the science coming out of your labs and your colleagues' labs here at the Institute.
Well, you've often heard me say that my goal in life is to be surrounded by people that are smarter than me. And you've also heard me say that's getting easier by the day. But seriously, the kind of minds that get into science and stay in science are people who simply have an insatiable curiosity. They're always looking for something that they didn't plan to find, if that makes any sense to you. In many businesses, we go in and we shoot towards a result that we want to achieve. Some machine that does something, or something that performs as according to spec, a car that works. Here, we don't know how it works. We don't even know how we want it to work. So we are discovering the pieces of puzzles and then trying to figure out what the puzzle looks like when we put it together. And I look at folks around here and they come up with the most amazing things that nature has invented, but we didn't know about. And so we're sort of putting together the puzzle of nature piece by piece. And I think that's pretty exciting.
We've even compared before the discoverers here at BTI to explorers, to people who are searching for new lands. Only these are sometimes invisible to the human eye, new terrains, new lands, and putting those puzzle pieces together.
Yeah, what you want to do as the leader of an organization like this is to provide an infrastructure, an environment, a career-friendly situation where people can simply do whatever they want. That's the goal. Get really smart people and turn
Unleash
them loose. Yep, turn them loose. And that's certainly the goal. We don't always get to do exactly what we want, but the more that happens, the more we find out what that puzzle looks like.
Well, thinking back to the time you've been here working to put together this puzzle of what plants do, how has BTI changed in the time since you've been here at the Institute?
Well, I'll tell you, one thing we've done a lot at BTI since I've been here is to knock down walls. And I mean that in a literal and a figurative sense. Every time I saw a wall, I would ask the mechanical department, can you take that wall out? And sometimes they would say, well, the building will fall down. I said, maybe not today. But a lot of our walls are there for no reason. And we find out that they inhibit communication between laboratories and between scientists. And then the other walls that have come out have really been what I mentioned at the beginning, these what I call disciplinary walls. So now you can't, it's a lot harder to pigeonhole a scientist as a biochemist or a geneticist or something. People cut across different disciplines. And so in that kind of metaphoric breaking down of walls and literal breaking down of the walls, we've also seen the rise of technology. So we talked earlier about how Bill Gates was associated with kind of a 386 processor for a very long time. It's the only thing we thought about. Now we're flooded with data. We can get so much information. We have so much information. It's everywhere. And now the real frontier is how to understand what it is telling us and how to dissect that. And so at BTI, we've built in a very large computational component because the computational scientists are the only ones that speak this language of big data. The biologists generate it and they study the organisms and the chemicals from those organisms, but they don't know how and when to use big data. So this has been the biggest revolution, has been the ability to produce high quality, high throughput data from chemicals, from proteins, from DNA, from RNA, from you name it, from drones, from satellites. The amount of information we have in today's world is unbelievable. And I think what's going to change in the future is how people are able to use that information and make sense out of that information, make biological sense out of it. We all have small kids. And what they can do with a smartphone at the age of 1 or 2 or 3, compare that to what we can do at our age with the same device, and it's not really that different, So what are these kids going to be like when they grow up into scientists, some of them, in 10 or 20 years? It just blows my mind how the technology will move and how the brain will function and how that combination will allow us to think in ways that today we can't even imagine. We're going to blow it out of the water.
I think about that too. I know I have 2 boys at home and that you have a boy at home, and we think about what will the future be like for them, and part of the work here is creating a sustainable future. And I want to mention too that when you were talking about the expansion of the massive quantities of data that our collaboration with our partners down the street at Cornell University have helped to bring some of that to fruition and advance. So we have one more question from our prepared set, and then maybe we'll have some more coming in from the audience. I'm not sure Keith is keeping a tab on that. Current state of discovery science. Why is that something that we want to contribute, we want to continue as a society to invest in?
Yeah, I think, again, you've heard me talk about this, Vanessa, but I think we have to
I want everyone
stop.
else to hear you.
And you've heard other people talk about this too. We had a workshop recently in Washington, D.C. where we talked about what kinds of science there really are, really framing it around plant science. And we have to stop talking about science as concerns the purpose of the science. Is it to create a product? Is it to create knowledge? All of those things matter. So we talk about now about problem solving or domains of science. Let's say a domain is drought tolerance in crops. We all know that there's drought problems every year in this country and every country. Solving drought tolerance requires plant breeding. It might require plant engineering. It certainly requires computation. It requires soil science. It requires water science. It requires basic knowledge of plant genes and genomes. So to solve a problem, if you think of the problem as a pie, there's a slice of it that's discovery science, and without it, you don't have a meal.
You have a pie.
You don't have a pie, you have a part of a pie. So discovery is a piece of solving every problem or understanding every biological phenomenon that we wish to understand as humans, and we're never going to get away with it. And the bigger the investment in discovery, the more phenomena we can understand, the more processes we can understand, the more solutions we can achieve. So I think discovery science is understood in that sense rather than the sense of it's somebody or some group of people simply pursuing knowledge for knowledge's sake. That is, in a way, how discovery science is done, but it's not necessarily why it's done. So I think if we understand the purpose of it along with the process, then we can understand why discovery science is never going away. We're not good enough to know what we're going to find when we do an experiment. It just doesn't work that way. So we're going to keep discovering.
Would we want it to?
Yeah.
So everyone, I think we're going to wrap that up. And I just want to thank everyone who's been with us today, all of our friends of BTI today and over the years. This wouldn't be possible without the entire team, without everyone inside and outside of the building. And I want to thank you, David, for sitting with me today and answering these questions, and to Keith for organizing today's lineup. I'm curious to see what we're going to have the rest of the day.
Yeah, and thanks a lot for having me on. And it's just been a tremendous privilege to be with BTI for all these years, and perhaps a few more.
Many, many more, we're sure. Thanks so much, David and Vanessa. We will be back on in about 10 minutes. We're going to make our way down to the Jander Lab, and then we will have board member Paul Comet on at 3 o'clock to close out the day. So we'll see you very soon.